This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, the Honorable Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party as well as the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. As we're making conversation today, Jesse, and talking to our listeners again, there are two pieces of very important breaking news that I want to discuss with you. First is there are more and more demands now for cognitive testing for President Joe Biden. Apparently, the reports are coming out that he's confusing the names of major foreign officials, for example, the leader of China and the leader of Russia. He is confusing his own public policies, and he's forgetting about meetings or what's happened at meetings. This is a very serious issue because we have a man running for presidency of the United States who has the ability to get us into or get us out of a war. He has the nuclear codes. He makes important decisions on a daily basis that threaten our economy, our national security, world peace, protecting or selling out our allies, caving in and appeasing our enemies. This is very serious stuff when you talk about somebody's fitness, cognitive ability to hold the office of President of the United States. Now, in anticipation of these kinds of problems, there was a constitutional amendment passed, Jesse. It's the 25th Amendment, which gives power to a president to send a letter to the Congress and to the cabinet saying he's temporarily suspending himself from office, and then the vice president becomes the acting president. It becomes much more complicated, Jesse, when that individual who may be cognitively impaired doesn't send that letter, and then there has to be a majority vote led by the vice president of the United States to have him removed, and that individual would then become the acting president. If that acting president was continuing in office and the elected president decided that he wanted to take the job back, and the cabinet, by the majority vote, thought that this was inappropriate, they would have to write to the Congress. Then the Congress, by 2/3 of each house, would have to make a decision. That's a simplified version of Section 4, Jesse, of the 25th Amendment. But without getting into technical legal details that I just articulated, there's a bigger question, and that is the moral responsibility of the Democratic Party to put forward a gentleman who is clearly cognitively impaired and suffering from mental disability. And it doesn't get better when you have this cognitive disability at his age. And the reports are, Jesse, that he is in closed-door meetings behind the scenes, not when he's doing his public appearances and whatever they pump him up with or don't pump him up with to get him going, that he's becoming more and more distracted, unfocused, and confused. So I'd like your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone again this morning. I think any American, any person on the planet that tunes onto their cable news network or onto their phones and streams a press conference or a press avail with President Biden sees very clearly that there are some cognitive issues here. So that's number one. And I think it was an outstanding piece, an investigatory piece done by the Wall Street Journal this week that outlined this. It was like 45 individuals, Republicans and Democrats, that have attended meetings, have attended private sessions, or have witnessed the president in his questionable state on his cognitive matters. That's one question. Now, you said the morals of the Democrats. Are we kidding here? Morals, ethics, and Democrat Party do not go together in any type of scenario. This Democratic Party, led by its progressive left wing of socialists, will do everything and anything, including Joe Biden, to hold on to power, hold on to influence, hold on to be able to profit from their office. There is no doubt that is the reason why the Democrats avoided a civil war by trying to basically maybe replace President Biden on the ballot. They should have done that for the good of America, for the good of the American people, and for the good of their party. But the other thing here is that I don't believe they're fully prepared to do it now. And you bring up the 25th Amendment, and you outlined it, very, very simply, directly, and easy to understand. These same individuals of the cabinet they want power, they want greed, they want to continue to have influence over the American people. They're not going to do anything to upset their apple cart, their gravy train here for America. I think that the right thing to be done is previously for the Democrats to move forward. But we all know they had a problem. They had the Newsoms of the world, governor of California. They had Kamala Harris, the vice president, and scores of others that would have created an internal fight on what would happen in this presidency or the future presidential nomination if this took place. The Democrats, as always, are putting the internal politics ahead of the people of America.
Well, what's particularly troubling to me is, and I use the word moral responsibility, because this is country over party, Jesse, and the Democrats have failed that. And they failed that, by the way, going back 4 years ago when they nominated Kamala Harris, the vice presidential candidate for their party, who became the vice president of the United States. Never was a person less qualified to be the vice presidency, to hold the vice presidency of the United States, to be one heartbeat away from the presidency than Kamala Harris. She was there for one reason and one reason only. She fitted the boxes. She checked the boxes for identity politics. She was a minority woman, African American and Indian American, and she was not capable of being president of the United States. And she's shown over the 3.5 years as an incumbency that she is a mediocrity. They don't give her anything responsible to do. Everything they give her to do that has an aura of responsibility, she's done nothing for. For example, Jesse, the border czar. She's supposed to be the border czar. She's the one supposed to protect the border. You have 12 million illegals running around this country. They violated the constitutional obligation to protect and defend this country. They violated the immigration laws. There are 12 million people running around that should not be here. Yesterday, Biden proposed an executive order, says he's going to try to close the border, slow down the border. But if you look at it carefully, it does nothing. It merely ratifies all the illegal acts of this administration. Not one person has a right to be here illegally. It's as clear as that, Jesse. It's a matter of law. Congress has spoken. There's a process to be had. You have to wait outside the boundaries of the country. You take your number online. You go through a process. Then you have the hearing to see whether or not you have a right to be here because you're a victim of persecution in your country. You do not have the right to jump the border and then get amnesty. So Biden is talking about giving hundreds of thousands immediate amnesty, putting a pathway to citizenship for the others, giving them working papers, which is just swell because that gives them then a right to vote in our elections. Are they kidding me or they mean it? Where is the outrage from the members of the Democratic Party about a fast and loose administration that cares nothing about abiding by the Constitution of the United States and the federal immigration laws? So they're caught. They have a catch-22. They can't get rid of Biden because then they have to replace it with Kamala Harris. They're really going to sweep both those people off their ticket? They are the victims of their own injury, the injury of identity politics. What say you?
I completely agree with you. But let me just point out two things. Let me go back first to his cognitive status and his status as a candidate. If I'm an American, as an American citizen, as an American voter, someone who loves this country, I'm wondering who is actually running this country. Who is there a coup d'etat going on somewhere where a staff member, an unelected member of his cabinet, an unelected member of his staff is now running the government, that has the ability to initiate a military action without the cognitive approval of the president? That's number one. Number two, on the border crisis. The border crisis, this Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, has taken 64 individual separate acts since on January 20th of 2021 to eliminate, erase, and abolish the southern border. He has allowed all these individuals to come forward. This executive action that he announced and enacted before he went over to France earlier this week was nothing more than a political Hail Mary that doesn't work. What you basically does, and Judge, you pointed it out, it basically gives amnesty to the 12 to 13 million people who are already here. These are not just asylum seekers. These are members of the cartel. These are terrorists. These are bad people. These are human traffickers. These are people and criminals in other countries that we're allowing unchecked to come into our country.
And what about the Chinese, the young Chinese nationals, military-age people?
Nationals.
That's a fifth column in this country, Jesse.
Absolutely. And the other part of it is he's basically saying and codifying through executive order 1.8 million illegals can come in per year. That's 1.8 million too many. Let's go back to Title 42. Let's go back to, if he truly wanted to save his presidency and save his country, he should have gone back, rolled back, and initiated all the Trump-era immigration tools and tactics and measures so that we would finally have a southern border, bottle this up, and then address the issue. We are spending $2.4 billion more in the state of New York, not on kids, not on cops, not on helping Main Street businesses, not on infrastructure, not on education, not on healthcare, on paying for Joe Biden's illegal migrants that are getting free housing, free money, free services at the expense of the middle-class family here in New York and throughout the country. Well,
that's very well said, Jesse. And I happen to be watching Larry Kudlow's show on Fox Business. And as you know, Larry Kudlow is also on WABC on Saturdays with us. He's a very smart guy, and he knows his way around Washington. He understands the economy and the obligations of the entitlement programs. This puts Social Security and Medicare at risk because the more bodies you have coming in, the more, and you're going to say these people are entitled to the healthcare system. These people are entitled to Social Security. And if the feds don't pick it up, the states have an obligation under Medicaid. I mean, this is going to burst the economic status and independence of this country. You can't have millions and millions.
Right now in the state of New York.
Of course.
We are seeing school budgets school boards having to make the painful choice, laying off teachers or piercing the cap on raising taxes beyond the CPI, hurting middle-class families, because we have Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams, and Joe Biden are forcing us to spend $2.4 billion for their failed sanctuary city program and their failed border policy. This is wrong, and that's why people who are meeting in these quiet corners of America, in these dark rooms where Democrats hang out and discuss strategy and how are we going to cling on to power and influence and control America for the next 4 years. What they're doing is they're just throwing Hail Marys and desperate acts that do nothing. And what's interesting, though, Your Honor, didn't you see what happened the day after he announced this failed, desperate executive order action on the southern border? To appease the left, Joe Biden says he's going to be nominating more progressive judges to the federal bench. That's the last thing we need.
Look, I will tell you, having been and having the honor and privilege of having been a judge, the awesome power that people have as judges, whether like I had on state Supreme Court or U.S. District Court judges or United States Court of Appeal, it's enormous, enormous power over public policy, public safety, economics. You don't want people there because they check a box because of an ideological commitment to an agenda. You want people who fairly carry out the laws without regard to fear or favor, and who will carry out the law as is intended to be, not as a weaponization device to go after political enemies. We've seen nothing but, for example, in the D.C. courts, United States district courts, you've seen nothing but overwhelmingly it's the Clinton, Obama, Biden appointees to the U.S. district courts and the D.C. circuit that have totally tilted the agenda of the American society because they have the power to do it. Remember how important, for example, the D.C. circuit is. They review every agency action in the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. circuit. They're the folks who do it, Jesse, which means if you have a runaway agency, the dark state, the hidden government, the administrative state, who overreaches in administrative rules and regulations and mandate policies that they do not have the right to make by administrative regs as opposed to congressional action. And they say, they look the other way and they say, no big deal. That means you've given to this judiciary and to the administrative agencies the power to remake America by administrative agency. Very frightening. The federal judiciary is very important. It has to be independent, and stop promising to give it away. The last time you played this identity politics, you wound up with a mediocrity like Kamala Harris. What more harm do these people want to do to our great country? This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. We'll be taking a short break. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a few moments for more interesting conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
I already love same-day delivery with Shipt, but it's so much better since I signed up for Target Circle 360. Why? Because I no longer pay price markups from the majority of stores through Shipt. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. That means no markups on groceries, pet food, even home goods and makeup. So to recap, I have more time to catch up on life while someone shops for me, and I spend less. It's a win-win. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Former CI officer Jason Hansen here. As someone who's dedicated my life to protecting people, I know the importance of guarding what matters most. And right now, with the global instability, that means securing your financial assets with gold. For me, I trust Advantage Gold with my own investments. Call them right now at 800-900-GOLD for a 100% free gold guide. And mention my name, and you'll also receive a complimentary $1,300 gift. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-GOLD right now.
Paid for by Advantage Gold. Performance may vary. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Always consult your financial and tax professional.
Did you know that New Jersey is leading the nation in clean energy investments?
Really, New Jersey?
And all with one thing in mind. You.
Me?
Uh-huh. New Jersey's Clean Energy Program offers incentives and services that benefit New Jersey residents, businesses, education, government, and nonprofit entities to help them save energy, money, and the environment.
Save money while saving the planet. Who knew?
Now you do. Visit njcleanenergy.com to learn even more.
Maybe we should change our nickname to the Clean Energy State.
A message from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse's the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. I am Judge Richard Weinberg. We're happy to have you with us once again. So, Jesse, more breaking news. Congestion pricing. And you and I have been talking about this for a long time, Jesse. This is a device that all it was legal thievery. The MTA dipping their fingers into the pockets of working people, whether they live in Manhattan, whether they come in from the outer boroughs, the 4 other boroughs of our great city in New York, the rest of the state, Nassau County, Suffolk County, Rockland, Westchester, Putnam, Orange, all these people who are commuters, New Jersey, Connecticut, all these people were going to have to pay this punitive tax. And that's what it was, a tax, a money grab. The cover was congestion pricing. We'll clean up congestion. We'll stop pollution, and we'll fund money for the MTA. Hochul has finally woken up and said she's suspending it, Jesse. Now, how long that suspension will go and whether she gets the support of the board of the MTA, which, by the way, she does control, and she should get it. They should green light that for her. Why is she doing this? And she issued a wonderful statement about the economic harm and the changes, the fortunes in New York because of COVID and people not coming to work and the new technology where you can work from home and declining retail stores and the impact on tourism and restaurants and the theaters and the museums and the culturals. All that's a wonderful statement she made, but she knew this for the last couple of years. Why did she wake up now, of all times, to do this? Because over 65% of the people in the state of New York do not want congestion pricing. So she's not doing this because she had this epiphany about all these negatives, that it wouldn't clean up pollution, that it wouldn't clean up congestion in the streets. But it was a political decision because her suburban colleagues in the state legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, were crying for help because they were worried about how this was going to impact in November. Jesse, your thoughts?
Your Honor, you're absolutely right. This is too little too late. And quite frankly, the same conditions that the governor stated in her statement this week, suspending congestion pricing, are the ones that existed as she was advocating for it, fought for it, and pressed the legislature to approve. This was nothing more than placing an unfair burden upon suburban families, suburban businesses, suburban commuters, and the workforce at the expense of giving more money to a runaway rogue agency like the MTA, which can't even protect or account for its overtime. They can't even literally can't have the trains run on time. So this was a failed experiment from the beginning. It was a failed policy from the beginning. And you're seeing this more and more. You're seeing them trying to change the failed cashless bail. You're seeing them now trying to do this with suspending indefinitely, they say, the congestion pricing. But I'll tell you what they should do. Because I believe they're suspending congestion pricing indefinitely means November 6th.
I agree.
After election.
Absolutely,
So
Jesse.
what I think they should do, dismantle the entire program. Dismantle it as you suspend it so that the apparatus is not there, that you can kick it in and hit consumers, hit commuters, and hit the businesses and the families out here in upstate and here on Long Island that have to make their living in the city, and those businesses in the city, as well as the businesses out here. Suspend it and dismantle the apparatus of congestion pricing so that if you want to restart it, you have to go through the entire process over again. This is what they should have done and must do to all their failed policies, just like cashless bail. You don't fix cashless bail. You repeal it. You get back to zero. You get prosecutors, cops, retired judges, members of the bar in a room together with lawmakers, and you do good criminal justice that's fair for everyone.
That's
not
exactly right.
Or these tweaks.
Jesse, all this is political cover with a November election coming up. Let's be honest about
Absolutely.
it. if she wasn't being hit by the legislators who think they're at risk in the suburban districts or in some out-of-borough districts like in Queens or Brooklyn or Bronx or Staten Island, she would not be doing this. This is all about the politics. You're absolutely right. We've been talking about congestion pricing for years. All the reasons that she gave in her public statements, as you eloquently point out, were there before. All of a sudden, they looked at the polling and they saw they were in deep trouble. And I'm saying to you, they ought to have the intellectual honesty, the moral integrity to repeal it. Just repeal it. Don't tweak it. Don't play games. Don't temporarily suspend it. Don't make the equipment temporarily inoperative and then be able to turn it back on with a switch. None of that nonsense. Repeal it. Now, this is what the danger is, Jesse, as I read the articles. She's saying they'll come up with the money from another source on a temporary basis. Notice those words, on a temporary basis. They have reserves to take care of what they need for the MTA out of reserves on a temporary basis. She's already talking about now increasing taxes on businesses in New York. So catch that. She was going to kill businesses, Jesse, because of congestion pricing, but she's going to kill them anyway because she's increased the tax burden on businesses. And when you increase the tax burden on businesses, you discourage employment, revenue, growth, services, products. You hurt business, you hurt the economy, you hurt the viability of the state of New York. And that's why, Jesse, as you've pointed out, over 400,000 people have fled this state in the last 18 months.
This state leads as the highest tax state in the union and is the most highly regulated state in the union and the worst environment to grow a business. So your answer is to raise taxes on the very individuals and entities that pay the bulk of the income tax and the property tax and that are the job creators? It's insane. It's completely insane. This governor is insane. She's tacking to the middle, hoping to stave off any challenges for her race in 2026. And perhaps maybe what she's seeing and reading the tea leaves, that Biden's going down with very similar policies, it appears, and by the grace of God, our nation is saved and Donald Trump is elected president come November 5th. And she sees that as a harbinger for her race in 2026.
I think that's right. And look, frankly, I'm glad she did this, but I'm not happy with the real reason why she's doing it, because it goes back to something that you and I have been talking about for a long time. It'd be a really good thing if the Democrats in the state legislature had their clocks cleaned. You got rid of the radical progressives who are negative on everything that makes the state worthwhile, and establish an important position for the Republican Party so we have a two-party system. You don't have a one-party dictatorship where they can do whatever they want since they can override vetoes. What say you?
It's absolutely true. We are on a precipice of a huge victories here in New York. This deep blue state, which almost knocked off their sitting governor by almost 3%, by about 3% of the vote with Lee Zeldin in 2022, and is the margin of victory of a Republican House in Washington. They see the residents, especially unaffiliated voters, and those Democrats that are common sense Democrats like yourself. They're saying, I can't pull the lever for another Democrat. I can't pull another lever for a socialist Democrat. I can't pull a lever for Joe Biden. That's what they're facing, and they're in a scramble mode to avoid that electoral problem in November.
You know, it's very interesting, Jesse, because I had a breakfast meeting today with James Carville, who's a senior advisor to the Clintons and still involved in politics. And he has his own reservations about Biden's fitness for office, but he understands what the game is. And I said to him this morning, respectfully, I said, the problem is the Democratic Socialists are controlling your party. And his response is, well, they're only about 15 to 20% of them are actually in the party. There are much more people like yours truly, who are moderate, common sense Democrats. I said, I don't know about the numbers, but I do know who's controlling the agenda. And he looked at me. Who's controlling the agenda? All the left-wing proposals that the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens of the world wanted were pushed by this Biden administration. All of the left-wing agenda that the left-wing progressives wanted in criminal justice, in Green New Deal, in economic policy, on regulation, in tax and spend, in the state legislature and the New York City Council, all come driven by the progressive left. So it's very nice that it's only 15 to 20% of the party registration, but give me a break. If the guys who are driving the agenda are the far left radicals, then what have you accomplished by electing Democrats? What say you?
Well, let's be honest, Your Honor. I know we're up against a hard break, but foreign policy of this country under the Biden administration is being driven and dictated by the state of Michigan, where he's concerned about losing Michigan in the electoral map. So he's doing everything he can in that power to throw an ally like Israel under the bus just so he can save his own hide.
Well, as our good friend Eric Levine often says, Biden does have a two-state solution. It's Michigan and Minnesota. It's all about electoral politics. Everything this man does is about getting himself reelected. Everything that Chuck Schumer does in terms of leading the Senate as the majority leader of the Senate is about holding on to the majority leadership of the United States Senate. This is not the way to govern. There are things that are much more important to the survival and the flourishing of this great country, of the city of New York, of its suburbs, the state of New York, than who wins an election because of partisan political concerns. The people who should win elections are those people who are ready, willing, and able to govern responsibly. And the Democratic Party has shown in the last 3.5 years in the federal system, as well as God knows how many years in the state, as well as God knows how many years in the city council, that they are not responsible governors. It's all about the parochial politics, their ideological drives, appeasing the far left. Very troubling indeed, Jesse. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show. We'll be back in a few moments. Please stay with us for our final segment and more interesting conversation.
This is Let the Record Show.
Get ready for Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, and Super Nintendo World. Now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Tell Me What Happened is a podcast series that shares dramatic stories of people helping people. And every one of them is true. These uplifting stories will fill you with hope. Listen today to Tell Me What Happened.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength, Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. I am Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse is a common sense Republican. I am a common sense Democrat. And we are here to bring common sense and truth to the American people and the residents of the state of New York, its suburbs, and its city of New York. We are here to speak the truth and get people thinking about the important issues of our time. We're talking about the future of America in our great state. So, in that regard, let me talk to you about something I've talked about the last couple of weeks, and I find enormously troubling, and I just want to do a recap for our listeners. I'm talking about the Trump hush money trial. So let me share these thoughts with you. Number one, this is as blatant example of prosecutorial abuse as I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been doing the law business as a law clerk to a federal judge, as an assistant attorney general of state, having been a prosecutor, having been a justice of the Supreme Court. I know a little bit about this process. And I know that prosecutors have prosecutorial discretion, which means you don't bring every case just because technically you can bring it. And some things are best left alone. You don't go after a former president of the United States who's a leading candidate for the Republican nomination, leading candidate for the presidency against a Democratic nominee. You don't bring charges based on technicalities on laws that have never been used this way before and where there's no harm to the public interest or the public safety. There was no economic harm. There was no public safety harm. There was no corruption of the system at all. What Trump did was very, very simple. He reimbursed his attorney for monies that were paid in return for a non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement is a kosher item. People pay for them all the time, and then they're supposed to be sealed. It's the end of the discussion. All claims or interests are resolved, and you move on. There's nothing wrong with that. What they try to do in this case, and Bragg did this, used the grand jury to do this after originally trying to walk away from bringing a case. He went forward with the case, even though the Federal Elections Commission, even though the U.S. Department of Justice, even though the United States Attorney's Office Southern District, even though he himself had rejected it primarily because it was a no-go case, and even though his predecessor, Cy Vance, had rejected it, he went because of the political pressure that was put upon him, and he presented this ham sandwich of a case to the grand jury, and they indicted. They never indicted and told you what the charges, the real charges were, because it's not a crime to pay hush money or get a non-disclosure agreement. And it was a bookkeeping entry. So it was an internal bookkeeping entry. It didn't mean anything. So who was harmed? What was the injury? In terms of taxes, Trump always overpaid taxes. So the taxes were overpaid. There was no issue there. And who are the witnesses against him? A porn star and a disbarred lawyer who's been convicted of perjury, his former lawyer, Cohn. I mean, it was ridiculous to bring this case. There was a defective indictment that violates the federal constitution as well as the constitution of the state of New York by not naming a crime. A judge, Merchan, who ruled every which way he could to lead the jury to a path so that they could not convict, except getting the outrage of the populace in New York City by 85% pro-Biden. They could not do anything but convict. They couldn't vote for an acquittal. And you'd even have a couple honest people on the jury who would vote not to acquit, so you'd have a hung jury to stalemate this unfair, unjust process. It's a violation of the Due Process Clause of the federal and state constitutions. It's an indictment of the prosecutors here. It's an indictment of this judge. The charge to the jury was totally reprehensible. It steered them again to a verdict. It couldn't be anything but a conviction, not an acquittal. It was a terrible charge. They never put in proof at all, Jesse, about what this other crime was, because they were bootstrapping from a misdemeanor to a felony because it was so-called in furtherance of another crime. They couldn't do it on the campaign finance law because that's not the jurisdiction of a local DA. They couldn't do it on a violation of the state election law because that's inherently ambiguous and self-defective as a matter of constitutional law. It was a joke, but yet this judge steered them to that verdict. Now, in the law, there's something called jury nullification, Jesse, and that means when it's so outrageous, the prosecution is so outrageous, it's so tainted, it's so corrupted by the prosecution and the court that you say that this shocks the conscience. They could have said, we're voting for acquittal regardless of the jury instructions by this judge. They did not do this. And I am embarrassed as a former prosecutor, as a former judge, that they allowed this to happen. Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, we discussed this. This is not a hush money trial. This was a political sham. Nothing more, nothing less. As you pointed out, you had a conflicted judge who gave slanted jury instructions. And let's not forget that if there was at the core of this a campaign finance problem, the judge denied the Trump team the ability to put on an expert in campaign finance.
Exactly. Brad
as a
Smith.
witness.
Exactly right.
Brad Smith. How could you, if you're using your bootstraps to take a dead misdemeanor and make it a felony and the continuance of another crime, how do you not let the defense fully defend itself? That's number one. Number two, what do we get the result of this? The people of this country have less faith in the judiciary than they did the day before this trial. They feel that the people that I talk to here and about and throughout the country, they feel, and the President Trump, I give him credit in his immediate comments after the verdict and then the day after his press conference, he was very measured, very direct, and he was very, very concise. If they can do this to me, they will do this to you. And that's what every American is thinking about. So let's look at that situation right now. But now you know what? The best thing about it is that we have history. You know what? We compare baseball players from this era to the previous eras. Let's compare cases and incidents of the Trump versus Democrats. John Edwards, he spent $1 million to try and,
And he, by the way, he used campaign finance money.
And he actually used campaign finance monies to try and do a hush deal to cover up an extramarital affair and a child that he had out of wedlock. Why? Because he wanted to engage in his further political aspirations and running for president. Let's not forget, John Edwards in 2004 was a running mate of John Kerry, who was defeated by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. So, and then the daddy of all examples, Bill Clinton gives and settles a sexual harassment case with an Arkansas employee that was under his direct supervision, that he was engaged in questionable activity with. She received $800,000 and was not permitted to discuss it. So how is there justice here? Where was Bragg? Where was Garland? Where were the Democrats in those instances to prosecute those cases? It's unreal, and it's not fair. And that's the one thing that holds the fabric of this country together, is that we have a confidence and a faith in the rule of law. These Democrats, to hold on to their personal greed and their profiteering, to maintain their influence over the American people, and to hold on to the last grips of power, will tear up the Constitution and destroy the very institutions of this land in the furtherance of their personal agendas.
That's exactly right, Jesse. It seems to me that the price America pays for this kind of banana republic weaponization of our court system and our prosecutorial function is a divided America. Because half the country thinks that Trump was railroaded, and half the country is jumping up and down thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And a shame on those people for thinking this is a wonderful thing for this country. And this is a taint on the reputation of America all across the world. It's awful. We look like a third world banana republic. It's shameful. And if you want to go after...
We look like Putin's Russia. That's what we look like.
Of course.
Let's just take out our political opponents and have no election. Or an election of blood.
Or Erdogan in Turkey trumps up charges against his political opponents and rounds them up by the thousands and puts them in jail. Or Cuba, where your forefathers came from.
Exactly. Let me point this out to you, though. I think there's a little bit of a difference here. The American people are speaking. In 24 hours, the Trump campaign raised $53 million. $53 million. That's the average American. That's a mom, a dad, who are putting their kids through school or taking them to a soccer field or a baseball field, and they're digging out $5, $10, $15, $25 and donating it to Donald Trump. There are these these companies are saying, whoa, these Main Street companies are saying, no. The economy is in the tank. And you know what? The Biden administration just is hiring 87,000 new IRS agents to do a Trump on me in my business. No. I'm donating to Donald Trump. So I do think that we're seeing the result of this. I don't see a Biden administration raising $50 million, $40 million, $10 million as a result of this verdict. But the other thing is, a poll that came out just after a verdict said that 67% of the respondents said that the verdict would have no impact upon how they were going to vote in this election. So even after destroying the judiciary, weaponizing the prosecutor's office, and hurting the American people and the people of New York, that it's okay, you can murder, rape, and burgle, but you get out on with cashier's bail. But if you're Donald Trump running for president, you're going to get indicted. You're going to get a sham trial.
Well, the coincidence, of course, is that this whole thing only started after Trump announced for the presidency again. Must be a real coincidence. And it's also a coincidence. And by the way, I don't know if you saw Merrick Garland, Judge Merrick Garland, who coming into this position of Attorney General of the United States, having service previously as a judge in the United States Court of Appeals in the D.C. Circuit, a man of some reputation. To me, when he just did a press conference as well as testimony before the Congress, shamed himself. Time after time after time, he's done the wrong thing. And his office. He has disgraced himself. He's disgraced the United States Department of Justice. It is an awful thing to see a man of a great reputation diminish himself that way. Nothing is worth losing your reputation that way, Jesse. All along, the cases protecting the Biden influence peddling, the tax scams, the influence peddling, the failure to file foreign agents, whether they're kickbacks or not, we have to get to determine to Joe Biden himself, even though there's some evidence that the 10% was given to him, according to Hunter's own statements. But certainly Hunter himself is guilty of not being a foreign agent registered. And what about the brother as well? What did he do and how did he get it? And by the way, what were they getting paid for? What was the great skill? What was the great talent? What was the great service they provided? They provided nothing but access. It was nothing but a payment in the millions and millions of dollars. I don't know, $10, $20 million. I don't know exactly the number that we know about. It's phenomenal that it was all about influence peddling because they provided no services at all. It was just access. And there's more revelations just the other day that the FBI was covering up, that they knew about this since 2013. They knew about this in 2013, and they knew about it when Biden took the stage in the debate against Trump in 2020 and said, oh, my son didn't make any money off of this. Families never benefit with China. And they knew it was a lie, and nobody said anything. And when they said that the laptop, the great book by Miranda Devine, Laptop from Hell, which revealed the corruption of the family and young Hunter Biden, when it revealed that they got 51 members of the Intelligence Committee, high-ranking officials, including the guy who chased it all up, Anthony Blinken, our so-called esteemed Secretary of State today, who chased this up. 51 people put their names on record saying that the laptop had all the conditions and elements of Russian disinformation. Well, it was as much Russian disinformation as you could possibly imagine. What Russian disinformation was? Look at what they did in the earlier time with Trump, earlier up with the Steele report. Disinformation came out of the Clinton campaign. So please give me a break. They won't tell you the truth. They lie to you. They try to manipulate you. It's unfair. It's wrong. It diminishes the faith of our people in this country's system, fairness, as you point out, and it diminishes us in the eyes of the world. What say you, Jesse?
Your Honor, I will point out two more things. Number one, after the verdict, Donald Trump raised $53 million in 24 hours. And there was not one riot, one fight in the streets, not one no barnstorming. There was nothing, no violence whatsoever. Can you imagine if it was the reverse?
We don't have to imagine. We know what happened 4 years ago with Antifa and BLM, where there were mostly peaceful protests. Remember that nonsense?
Yeah, as municipal buildings are burning down. And here's the other point: if this was not political, and you're the lawyer and the judge in this, but I understand politics, how does the number 3 guy in the Federal Department of Justice,
Colangelo,
end up in a state courtroom against his former boss's potential adversary, because he's the nominee? It's unbelievable.
Oh, and Garland got up there and said, well, he just applied for the job. No, there was no conversation. A guy leaves the number 3 job in the Department of Justice, a power position, if ever it was one, leaves that to become a local ADA.
If I'm the Attorney General and he comes to me, my number 3 comes to me and says, I'm going to take this job, I would counsel him and say, listen, you can take that job, but maybe you should wait till after this trial. I mean, there are ethics, there are morals, and there are optics that we have to protect as American citizens and the custodians of American institutions like the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to talk about a little bit about the Hunter Biden trial that's going on in Delaware now, but then I want to switch gears. But let me tell you this. Right now, there's a hometown advantage of the Biden family in Wilmington, Delaware. Jill Biden, the First Lady, she walks in and she sits there. She's got the whole entourage of the family. They're making eye contact and smiling at the jury. They're giving a signal to Weiss, who's the corrupted special counsel who allowed the statute of limitations to run against the serious allegations against Hunter, which would have necessarily brought in Joe Biden. Remember that. With that statute of limitations running on the most serious stuff in the world, which could have looped in Joe Biden, that was not a coincidence that they allowed that to happen. And you also remember he was trying to put forward a sweetheart deal, but this judge, she had integrity and a decency and a sense of fairness to stop that sweetheart deal from going through, and that's why he's on trial now. But I'm very concerned, Jesse. I've been watching the reports on who these jurors are, these 12, and let me tell you something. They're going to play the hearts and flowers gambit. And what's the hearts and flowers gambit, Jesse? The hearts and flowers gambit is, he didn't know any better. He was addicted to drugs. He was an alcoholic. He couldn't willfully and knowingly have filled out the form incorrectly, deliberately lying, that he's a junkie at the time he's getting a gun and walking around with a gun. Please, I talked earlier, the earlier segment, I talked about jury nullification. And they should have nullified what the prosecution was doing in New York against Donald Trump. Well, what I'm afraid of is you're going to have jury nullification in favor of the Biden family in Delaware, because it really is just a small town Americana where everybody knows everybody, and all these people who have families who had problems with addiction and alcoholism on the jury. And you have one person, by the way, whose husband's a member of the Secret Service, and she's a former member of the Secret Service. How do you think she's going to vote on this? So she could be the one holdout for a hung jury. Or she could turn the jury around and have jury nullification, even though this kid is guilty as hell, because the papers are very, very clear. This is a paper case. It's a document case. He said it in his own book. He said it on tape. He said it on interviews. He knowingly and willfully lied on a form which would subject you or me or anyone else to real prosecution. The case never would have gone to trial because you would have pled it out as quickly as you could. What say you?
Well, we all know it's been said, in basic terms, that the FBI and the Department of Justice does not lose paper cases. Like as you pointed out, this is a paper case. They better not lose this case. And the only reason I believe that there will be, and that's a possibility, is because, again, the Biden administration and their cohorts have placed their thumb on the scales of justice to benefit them at the expense of a political enemy.
And what do we do about this? So let me just tell you about my good friend, John Yoo, who's a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, who's a regular guest on Katz and Cosby, which I have the privilege of being on nightly. John Yoo is a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the United States, and he proffered the following proposal, which is the Republicans need to use the same exact tactics as the Democrats. It's time for the local prosecutors were Republicans, the local and state attorneys general were Republicans, to go after the Democrats because there's more than ample ammunition and crimes that these folks have been committed. Let them get a taste of this so you have mutually assured deterrence. They'll say, oh, it's not just the Republicans who are the possible defendants in these kinds of prosecutions, these unfair prosecutions, but the Democrats can be the victims of this as well. Ava's just given us the signal from the booth, Jesse, so we're going to have to sign off. We have so many more things to talk about. So, Jesse, I want to thank you for another great show. I look forward to being with you again next week, and we'll continue this conversation on Let the Record Show. We thank our listeners for joining us once again.
This is Let the Record Show.